Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I am very excited to bring both Dean and Alana Stott. Very excited to have you on. Seb, always good to see you as well. Now, while I'm going through my shtick, y'all should be doing yours. Make sure you like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff so you get your emails every day that we go live, which is, of course, every day. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything like that, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will engage them directly throughout the show. Any thoughts or issues before we get started from the team? No, everybody good? All right, let's do it. So, tools and vices. This is the topic for today. Winterstorm jumps in with a good morning, team. Morning, Winterstorm. And tools and vices. Now, this was a request from the collective to get into and to really dive into. And I initially, my first thoughts on it were tools and vices are quite different. Something that, helps you versus something that is detrimental, let's say. And I have a quick definition on a vice that I want to touch on really quick before we go anywhere because I think that's important. And there's a bunch of different ways you can look at this, but right now it is the best one I found was a weakness of character or behavior, as in a bad habit. So I'm going to go around and just kind of get your guys' thoughts on what a vice is, what a tool is comparatively, and then we'll dive into the rest of the conversation. So, Seb, I'm going to start with you, throw you on the fire. What are your first thoughts on tools and vices?
Well, I suspect that anything that's can be beneficial that's done in excess can turn into a vice, and inversely, something that necessarily perhaps is done in excess, if it was done in a reasonable amount, might be a tool. And so, I think for me, it has more to do with what is it being used for, and so the intended purpose, and what kind of sort of I don't want to use velocity again, but what kind of sort of attitude I have in relation to the tool or the vice. If I'm being extremist about it, one way or another, you can find that most good things can end up being bad, and sometimes bad things can be good in smaller amounts. So this is the first thing that comes to mind for me.
I like that. Alana, how about yourself?
Yeah, equally the same thought. I mean, I think the first thing that came to my mind when I was seeing the subject was social media. It was created as something that is a connecting tool to bring people together. But addiction, overuse, misuse, etc., can cause it to become a vice. So it's exactly the same as Seb. Anything can become one or the other. But that was my initial thought with social media.
Raj. Dean, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think one that jumps out to me, a tool is something that helps you progress, move forward, aid you. So first thing I thought was with the phone. I'm always looking for tools or apps that help me plan my day or to-do lists and things like that. But also when I pick this up, I also hit Instagram, which then ends up being my vice and end up procrastinating. So first thing that comes to my mind is the phone. It is a tool if if you use it correctly, but it can also then be a vice as well.
Absolutely. Shaun, how about yourself?
Well, I'd just like to come at it from a different angle. And I think that rather than putting too much of a negative spin on tools and vices, my tool might, this is a mountain bike, and my vices. So then
I think we might have lost him. Dang. The coffee shop Wi-Fi just didn't quite hold out. So we'll come back to.
I think he said he uses a combi tool on his mountain bike. That's all I got.
There you go, coffee tool on the mountain bike. I like it. Well, let's dive into.
Great.
I got your back. Do you want to try again? No, I think he's frozen again. Okay, we'll just we'll carry on and manage as we go along. So, I think you guys are accurate in all of this, and I mean that's the way I see it as well. And what I wanted to ask right off the bat is about that line where it becomes a hindrance versus becoming helpful. And I'm really wondering more along the lines of what are your guys's, I guess, lines, do you have a set, like, oh man, if I spend 20 minutes on my phone, I gotta like put it down for 2 hours? Or is there just a kind of a realization, oh man, I need to move on from today? Dean, what do you think?
I think Alana and I were at an event recently, and there was a speaker there, and Alana will know who it is. And this guy literally had his day planned out to the minute. You know, it was 20 minutes of this, it was 20 minutes of 20 minutes. And it's good to have a plan. And, you know, and he factored in there, I think about 3 hours a day was social media. And then, you know, physical exercise, going for a walk, blah, blah, blah. So I think, day to day, it's good to have a plan. I like to plan. Lana and I will sit on a Sunday and plan for the week. But, as we discussed previously, you can't control the uncontrollables. This guy was so strict in his plans. I was like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And so it's good to have those tools. But I think, again, I've just mentioned here, I'm still doing it now, still trying to find the ultimate app. Maybe I should just go design one myself. For it, but I always end up reverting back to pencil and paper. That always ends up being the tool for me. So I think, yes, it's good to have these tools. It's good to have these timelines, but and some things work for certain people, and some things don't work for them as well. So everyone's quite unique. Alana has her way of doing things than I do mine. I just go to notes and literally go off memory, whereas Alana, and she'll discuss her way as well. So what is a tool for me might be advice for someone else, and vice versa. Excuse the pun.
Mm-hmm. Alana, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that self-discipline is a big part of it, because I think we all know what our vices are, but we'll still act in them. So for me, social media, I need it for some things. But I do understand that, for example, Instagram has an amazing way of just sucking you into something that, you'll maybe, I need to go and get a phone number, I need to go and reply to a message, and 2 hours later, you're still scrolling, looking at cats and random things. I put complete blocks on all mine. So I've got 45 minutes that a day, and then it switches off, which your iPhone can do for you. But also, I think even if you take away from the phones and things like alcohol, exercise, anything that you might, start with with a good order, like I'm going to only have one drink today, but that every single time you said I'm only going to have one drink, it ends up 10 drinks. Well, you need to have the self-discipline to say, well, actually, it's not going to work. And when I say exercise is a great thing, but then if it can go into excess and you're doing it too much and it's taken over your life, you need to know where your boundaries are with that too. So that's why I'm saying that self-discipline is probably the first thing. If you know that this thing can turn into a vice, you need to know where you can put your boundaries on it.
I like that. Seb, thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of like that. Imagine somebody struggling with alcoholism or narcotics or whatever the case may be, and knowing that I can't be in this room, I can't be doing certain things, I can't be with the wrong crowd, I can't, and just knowing your limitations. I really do think that for me, as soon as it starts interfering with what my end goals are, so if I have a week this week that's somewhat planned, so I'm a bit of a planner, but I also like to go organically, so it leaves me room for, if I don't necessarily feel like doing this here, is there a secondary thing I could be doing that's beneficial to the cause or to the mission, and that doesn't interfere, instead of I must do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't always work that way. But once it starts interfering with the end goal, and this week I have a bunch of stuff to do, and I just spent, say, 3 hours on Instagram getting my dopamine hits from a post that I posted and waiting to see who likes it, and it becomes a big problem. And over the course of the last year, I know I have a propensity to get sucked into Instagram. That's just a fact. And so what I do is, especially for my studies this year, so I was doing a postgraduate, and I'm sitting there and I'm putting times like on my phone, so it's the phone is on night mode for an hour. At the end of that hour, I have 5 minutes to go on Instagram. That's allowing myself to take that 5 minutes, and then the 5 minute is done, then the timer starts again, and I must do 5 hours a day of studying. And so this was what it was over the course of last year. Now it's reduced slightly now because a bunch of curveballs, but that's essentially what it was. And so for me, being very self-aware that I have the tendency to get sucked in, then I have to, as Alana was alluding to, I have to override this with the right thing to do, which is discipline, and really sort of be strict with it.
Absolutely. Shaun, do we got you back? What do you think?
I'll give it a go. I'm going to kill my video just in case I've got good audio bandwidth.
Sounds good so far.
So, okay, great. So, tools and vices. I think one of the things that interests me is we can contextualize our own tools and vices not as well as we can contextualize others. So when we look at ourselves, sometimes we miss the fact that we actually have vices and we're misusing our tools, but we can look around externally and identify others are misrepresenting their tools and vices. And so we can judge others, but not judge ourselves. So I think one way to kind of understand if we do have vices is to ask others to take a cold eye review on our way of living, for lack of a better term. And that comes back to possibly coaching. I'll end it there.
Absolutely. Dean, looks like you got some thoughts on that. What do you got?
I was waiting for the mountain bike story. I think for me, and something that's again that you just touched on there, Shaun, was coaching. Alana and I do coaching as well, but again, tools that work for us might not work for others. I think, and also something Alana mentioned earlier about the balance. Doing something too much can be a vice. And the perfect example of that was when I was training for the world record attempt. We actually had to ban the word training from the house because all I could think about or talk about was training. It actually was becoming a vice. Shaun knows this. It actually becoming a vice in our relationship. And to me, I didn't get the balance right. I generally thought if I took a day off or missed a training session, it was going to affect the outcome of this whole world record, and it wasn't. And so it's just trying to find the balance and getting that balance correct. Because I think overuse from a tool can turn into a vice. It's just knowing where those limits are.
Seb, you look like you got something. What do you got?
Yeah, sorry, I got to jump on that one. I really like that because it's really the tendency is to turn. So we know that if you are to do something exceptional, you may have to be obsessive. You may have to obsess over it for a certain amount of time. But I think where the lines get crossed is where we see obsession in thoughts like obsession in actions. It's like, well, I'm obsessed with, taking steps to make whatever it is happen. But if I'm obsessing just in my head, spinning my wheels, am I actually doing something here, or am I just getting sucked in the vortex of what it is that I have in front of me? So I do believe that, a certain amount of obsession is necessary, actionable obsession, as I like to call it. But when I start spinning my wheels and thinking about the 8 million things that don't change anything to the actionable steps I need to be taking, or I'm too far ahead, or I'm completely gone and I'm just completely consumed by it, this is where, to me, this is where the alarm bells are ringing a bit, right? And a bit of a recalibration is needed.
Mm-hmm. Alana, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, probably just following up from both of them. Having that, I guess, an empathetic voice to both the tools and vices. As Dean was saying, if we took just Dean's example, his training, which the word still gives me shivers, it might take over everything in that day, whereas there's all these other things that need to be happening in that day. But his need and his obsessive need to train was literally my vice, because our world had to work around his training, so the kids and everything else had to go around that. So his training became a vice to me, and my tool and my coping mechanisms would probably be what Dean would class as a vice to what he was doing. So when I'm saying it empathetically, we need to look at what we're seeing as our tool might be somebody else's vice, and we need to be aware of that, especially in a family dynamic or a work environment. I often talk about when I was a bank manager, I used to try and make everybody work the same way as I did. I was very focused on earning bonuses and making money and everyone achieving and everyone going out there rich. And I was trying to make everybody work and be in that same way, not understanding that everybody's motivated by different things. You know, some of us have got similar motivations, but we do all have our individual and unique motivations. And I think you've got to be able to see that in everybody else to make it work as a collective for yourself.
Seb, what do you got? I see you taking notes like mad, so like jump in here. What do you got?
I can write, believe it or not, people. Well, ish, anyways. Yeah, so during a recent, well, a year ago probably, speech in Banff, there was, you know, a couple hundreds realtors and a lot of really, really high achievers. And the entire weekend, all the conversations were about was earnings and how to increase earnings and how to increase productivity and how, you know, and it was, I actually sat on all of those sessions on account of, hey, maybe I can learn something, you know, that I can incorporate in my business or in my life. And I did learn a ton. But one of the things that came to bear over the course of the weekend was we're sitting in a panel with all these experts, these realty experts that are very successful, and all they use as a sort of benchmark of success is money. And I had to say it, you know, I had to kind of unpin a hand grenade and say, hey guys, just so you know, if you're sitting there wondering like, hey, I'm not looking at making the next million, but I want to have some work-life balance. I want to have a family. I want to have, you know, those things. Like, you have to be looking at things differently. And this entire weekend was spent talking about making money. It's not to say that every single one of you here is geared at making money. And it was like total silence, not a word was said. But then there was a whole bunch of people that came to see me after, and they were like, thank you so much for saying that, because we were sitting there the entire time thinking, like, do I have to be a millionaire to be useful in this life, or to have a purpose, or to be you know, successful, or what's the measure of success here, and why does it seem as though, you know, the financial piece is and it's the piece you can see, and of course, you know. But yeah, it was just a very interesting realization that no, it's absolutely correct. What is your measure of success as you define it, and how are your tools and vices contributing to it or taking away from it?
I like that a lot. Alana, you got any thoughts on that? I'm gonna come right back to you.
Yeah, it's something I write quite a bit about in How to Ask for Money, and it's, you know, my motivations in life are, I'm very honest with them, is making money and helping people, because one of them does come hand in hand with the other. And you know, as a younger manager, I used to get really frustrated with people and annoyed that they weren't, you know, pushing for these unlimited. I used to work when we had limited bonuses, and then when I started working somewhere that had unlimited bonuses, I'm like, there's all this money to be made. Why are you not working hard? And you know, the story with one woman in particular, she just wouldn't work. She wouldn't do anything past 5 o'clock. As soon as 5 o'clock hit, she was out that door. And then just one day, this one cold evening, I looked out the window and I saw her leaving, and she was basically running across the road to her daughter, who had just had a baby. She'd just become a grandma. And this big happy smile on her face, this super positive, motivated energy that was coming from her. And it was almost then when the pin dropped, and I realized this was her motivation every single day. Her motivation was to finish work and get out there to be with her family. And I thought, right, Alana, you need to approach her really differently. You can't be saying, look, there's all this money to be made. You need to approach her with this family-centric, this approach. And then that's why I started studying about motivations and finding out about the 8 motivations in people that, you know, and then the first thing I then do is when I meet new people is I try and identify what is their motivation, what is their goal, because their actual vice might be money. Some people just hate money. You can still get them to work hard and do the things they need to do if you can find out what it is that's really driving them.
Dean, you got
it's something we were chatting about there, about the conference we went to in Banff, and it's the interesting that we've been to some of these as well. I've on the stage as well. People are coming to see how they can be rich. They judge their success in life and being wealthy. I've actually heard from a couple of speakers, and something me and Alana talk about as well. Money comes and goes. You know, it comes and goes. But is wealthy being the person who's got all the money in the bank but no one to share the happiness with, or is the wealthy the person who has that family structure, who's managed that balance? So I disagree when I see these conferences. It's all about making the money. You know, that isn't success. But tools and vices, again, you know, we all come from an SF community. The amount of times the guys have, we have a 95% divorce rate because it ends up, the tool, their job ends up being their vice. They haven't balanced that. There is no balance to that work and family structure. So yeah, that's one thing that's just jumped out to me is, what is wealth? Is it money, or is it managing to balance that family structure? And something where me and Alana have been quite successful is Alana's tools are my vices, and my tools are Alana's vices, and we've identified that. Tools and vices, or strengths and weaknesses. Like Alana could easily bang out 100 emails. I need to get myself in the mind frame to do 2 emails. I quite happily cycle, 150 miles. So yeah, I think, you can use tools and vices in your relationship as well.
Absolutely. Shaun, you got any points on this?
Yeah, I do. Hopefully, I'll keep it short just in case it gets all choppy. So when I left special operations, I wasn't making very much money at all in special operations. It was a time in that community where we weren't being paid very well. In fact, I did the math on it, and I was getting paid about $5 an hour, $5 an hour to do that job, which is, it's insane. But when I left the teams, because I made so little, I set a milestone for myself to make my first 6 figures. And it wasn't like an obsession. It was a milestone. So the moment that I made my first 6 figures, I thought, oh, that's appealing. And I started chasing it more. I went 6 figures and a half. And then I thought, wow, I'm now beyond my milestone. And I am now becoming obsessed with making too much money. And so I dialed it back. I dialed back my work pace and got a better balance on my relationship with money. But it took a milestone plus to make me understand what my relationship with money was. And so once I determined that, then my relationship with money is healthy. But I think rather than being obsessed about chasing money, set a milestone in money. And once you achieve that, then you can decide beyond that point.
I like that. Any you guys got? I got a question here on the comments here, but any thoughts on that further? Anybody else? Dean, you look like you got something. What do you got?
I was probably going to ask Alana later, what's our milestone? You know what I mean? Each time we hit it, she sets me a new target. The problem in our relationship, Alana sets me targets. She knows that from our background being mission driven, she just sets me missions. So I'd love to know what ours was. That was.
That's a good question, Alana. You got a milestone for us?
But I was actually, one thing that I do in the coaching is, and you often say it to people, what is it that you want? If I'm here, I'm your fairy godmother, I'm here to give it to you. What is it you want? And the amount of people that give me answers like, I want to be financially stable, I want to be rich, I want to be, and I'm like, well, what does that look like? I'm standing here, I want to give it to you. What is it that what is this? Oh, well, I just want to be happy. But again, what does it look like? What are these things that you want? And I often say, like, if I'm stood here as that fairy godmother, I've got the magic wand, I'm so confused, I don't know what to do for you. You need to be able to tell me exactly what this happiness, this financial wealth, all these things look like. And I think when we really look at it, I want to have 10 million in the bank, but no family, no friends around me. What is it? This happiness, this wealth, everything else looks like. And if we could put that more into what our vision is and what we're seeing, and we're seeing, grandkids running about, or, a lovely piece of grass in front of our house, whatever it might be that this happiness or this financial wealth looks like. I think we need to dig that a little bit deeper. To be able to set our goals and targets, because saying, oh yeah, I want to make my first 6 figures, I want to make my second, I want to make 7 now, I want to do this, but why? What is it we're looking at around that to get to there? And I think that might take away from that obsessive chase of the figures.
100%. Seb, what do you got there?
Yeah, this goes back to the whole, is manifestation some sort of spiritual wazoo, or is there a way to bring manifestation in by way of lining up our actions with our thoughts? And this, I like that, because most people truly believe that if you believe something hard enough and if you dream it hard enough, it will come to fruition. And this is of the realm of the magical. Like that's not how this works. How this works is that when you start lining up your actions with your thoughts, and you are going to start to, it opens your brain up to receive information. It opens your brain up to grasp the subtlety and the connections you make with people. Like it listens, essentially primes you to the end goal that you have in mind. So what Alana is speaking about is exactly that. Is just, are you having a fantasy about being, at a certain place, and this is all dream based and there's no real actionable items, or what is it that we need to line up so that works? And people don't like to hear that because it makes them feel better to talk about it. Like, it makes them feel better. It's almost like there's a bit of a dopamine hit there. Like I'm feeling like I'm doing something in relation to the end goal, but really nothing's being done at all. And until you strategize and put the steps down and what it's going to look like in application.
Do you think that it could be, and this is just a thought right off the top of my head, is that a known vice is more comfortable than an unknown tool set? And so I'm just thinking in terms of, like, say, woodworking, right? One of the things I really love doing is working with wood. I love building stuff. I love doing all these things, but I'm kind of like, I'm an old schoolist, right? I like to hand sand things. I like to do everything almost the hard way, when there are perfectly valid tool sets that I could easily apply. But I know the vice that I like. I know how it works. So to enter into something new seems challenging. Do you think it's kind of along those lines, Seb?
Well, I mean, it could be a part of it, but then I have another question: is why do you like doing it by hand? And is that necessarily a vice? Because it necessarily isn't. Like, is there a way for you to build furniture by hand, that people will pay top dollars for, and instead of building 100, you're building one this year? I don't know what it looks like. We're talking about, hypothetical, but before I start looking at somebody's underlying reason for doing certain things and qualifying their actions as vices, I better have my house in order big time, for one. And then second, we need to have a very, very, in-depth conversation to establish that, because I don't think it's that simple. I think it's an oversimplification to think that way a bit.
Raj, Dean, you got any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'll probably go back to Seb and Alana's comment about, I think Wright saying, Seb, that people like to talk about these things for the dopamine hit. There's manifestations surrounding yourself. You manifest, it's going to happen. Or if you put a visualization board, it's going to happen. But it's not going to happen unless there's action. The amount of people we speak to, and they say, this is what I want to do. This is what I want. Okay, so what have you done to get yourself to there? So, and you guys no doubt get it. I get it as well. I think some of these young kids, how do I get into the special forces? How can I get in the SAS or SBS? You don't take one pill and you get in. People are always looking for that fast track to that end result. Whereas I think a lot of it is action. So yeah, I can relate to what you're saying there, Seb, as well. But then again, a visualization board, I've never done one actually, but a visualization board is a good tool. One thing Alana and I do each year, from the moment we met, we did a dreams book. It was basically a dreams book. What is it we want to do? And every New Year's Eve, we get it out and we tick off what we've done, but we also then add to that list as well. So you can be distracted with life. You can have, dreams and ambitions, and then you end up going one way. But the best thing to do is sort of come back to that, write it down, have a visualization board. Because yes, it's, as you touched on, Alana, you want you want $10 million. Not it's an Alana, but the person she's talking about wants that $10 million. But what do you want with that $10 million? Having that visualization board, is it a ranch in Montana, with a couple of horses? And so I think, that's my input on that one.
Yeah, 100%. Alana, you got anything to action? I like it. Alana, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think that some of these, as Seb was saying, that what is the tool and what is the vice in a situation? Well, we're doers as human beings. We're meant to do things, and we do it and we learn. And as you say, doing the woodwork and using your hands and building it and creating this thing, you're learning all these things along the way. And one of my biggest pet hates at the minute, which I'm sure I'm going to have to learn some of, but I really don't. I mean, I still write everything down. I still use my old school calculator, but AI, it's something that we've been given as this tool, and it drives me up the wall. I've seen people write emails to me, and I can see it's AI as soon as I start reading it, and I can see that they're not, and we've got this brain that's meant to be used like a muscle, and we're meant to be training it every day and working it out and doing all these things. And now we've just got this tool that's just telling us what we're meant to think and how we're meant to say it. And then we're putting that out there as our own words. And that to me is really scary. And to me, it's a huge vice that many will call the greatest tool that's been invented. So it's a worry.
Absolutely. Shaun, I know you got thoughts on AI, so hit it up.
I've had about 27 thoughts. So first things first on manifest, it kind of rhymes with hammerfest, but not enough people hammer. A lot of people just manifest. And so manifesting is a cool thought process, but it doesn't mean a thing until you apply action against it. And the amount of action you apply, the closer you get to a hammerfest, is the faster that you will manifest. That's all I've got to say on that. The second thing is on AI, very briefly. I know that in the spirit of things, Alana is correct. However, the genie is out of the bottle. And so there's no point in pretending that it's going to get put back in, because it ain't. It's only going to rapidly, exponentially increase. Non-linear, it's going to be exponential in the months to come. We could be looking at singularity between 8 to 12 years from now. And so there's no point in sticking our heads in the sand on that one either. We have to learn in the present to start managing how to play with these kind of tools, AI, ChatGPT 4.0, large language models. I don't know if anyone has seen the recent, it's now 3-4 days old, where Lex Friedman is introduced to the metaverse through the new interactive modality with Mark Zuckerberg. Lex Friedman has been in large language models and been in MIT a long time with robotics. He is familiar with a lot of the bleeding edge technologies, but his mind was blown away when he entered into the metaverse with Zuckerberg, again, just 3-4 days ago. If you haven't seen that clip, prepare to have your mind blown. So now combine a large language model like ChatGPT 5.0 with the metaverse, and now we're talking about things called synthetic avatars or synthetic assistants, where you can't determine the difference between a real person and an AI. So the genie is out of the bottle. We all have to learn how to play with it well. And in these early days, I know that it's a bit frustrating as people misuse it, but it is going to be as commonplace as butter on bread. So we all need to learn how to use it wisely.
Absolutely. That's almost, I was going to say a warning in disguise, but it's not really disguised at all. That's just like, we need to sort this out. I got a question on this from the comments here, but any further thoughts on any of that at all?
Yeah, just one quickly here. I have one word for this. It's called Terminator. No, no. What I was going to say with the old AI thing is I was very resistant as well in the beginning when I started, because I love to write, and I was like, well, now everybody can write. It doesn't matter if I can write, so what have I done that for? But ultimately, it comes down to this. What is that person presenting in person? I don't care what you do with your AI. Yeah, you can write all the stuff in the world with your AI, but one day you'll be having these face-to-face conversations, and there'll be no hiding. There will be no AI to, take over the conversation and make some trying to God, just be you. Like you won't have that. And so yes, it's useful. It can be, and it can be used to frame your work if you're somebody that love to work, intellectually and everything. And it's a great tool for that. But I would be very, very sort of, careful with building your business or your brand around your AI use, because it will come back hard.
I do have to say this. Before the collective became a thing, I was talking with Travis Bader. It was one of the first podcasts I ever did. Travis knew that I was well immersed in artificial intelligence and these kind of subjects. And I specifically said to him, one of the reasons that I want to do something like the collective is to get in front of AI so that real people can talk to real people, establish themselves as real communicators, so that when this does become a thing, at least people will understand us. And we will have established a patrol base of real humans communicating. Now, I'd love for Travis to confirm that that's our conversation, but I hope that you'll all take me at my word that I am literally doing the collective to get in front of AI while still playing with AI. So we all have to figure out a way to work with this thing as best as we can. That's all I've got on that.
Yeah, you and I have had that conversation a number of times, actually, on making sure that this was in order to get out in front of it. Dean or Alana, got any other thoughts on that? Dean, what do you got?
Not on AI, but another one that, again, the genie's out of the bottle, and you've got to it's here. And I'd love to hear Shaun's perspective on this. It's the electric bike. I've only ever been mountain biking once with these guys. We started talking about the electric bike. And straight away, I was against it. I saw it as a vice. I thought, well, physically, people are not going to be as strong as they used to. But actually, what they said is, no, you can actually travel further distance. You can still achieve the same fitness aims, but go further distances. And then when they talked about older people being able to still maintain or be physically active, people with injuries still being able to be physically active. If Alana and I and the kids, go for a bike ride, I will not have an electric bike. I will refuse to ever get on one. But it means that they can still keep up with me, or I can keep up with them. So what I did see as a vice, I now, the genie's out the bottle, everyone's using them here. It can be a tool. But I'd be keen to hear your thoughts, Shaun, on the electric bike.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief, and it's a fascinating subject that we could turn into an entire podcast, but I'll just say this. So the last 3 days we're here in Revelstoke, just smashing on trails, shredding them. And I've never been able to do that with my wife because I've been racing and riding for 25 years, and I have a certain velocity on a non-electric bike or electric bike. But my wife has never been able to ride with me just because I ride too fast. Very few people can ride with me because I ride fast. I'm a good technical rider. But now we're riding together for the first time and enjoying ourselves for the first time because the electric motor is the equalizer out there on the technical trails. It doesn't mean that she can ride faster than I am, but I can slow down and she can add more power and we can ride together, which is my first interesting point. The second thing is, and this is a funny little story, a little segue, but we just come back from our ride yesterday, and I think so far we banged out about 75 kilometers of hard technical riding and about 2,100 meters of vertical gain. So we just finished the day. We're walking into our Airbnb, and there was a guy standing up there, and he said, hey, you got one of those electric mountain bikes, as if it was a Harry Potter one. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, well, yeah, I'd love to have one of those, but that's kind of like cheating. And I was like, yeah, I suppose. And he said, I'm old school. And I said, cool. And I'm still trying to walk away from this guy. And he said, why do you ride one? And I said, I don't know. I've only had it a year, and I really enjoy it. And he said, well, I like to earn my way. And I said, yeah, I understand. And he just wouldn't stop. So eventually I had to pull out the card from up my sleeve. And I said, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but here's the thing. I think you've misread the situation. I've owned this for a year, but I've just come off of over a decade of racing single speed hardtail. And I'm 60 years old. So it's kind of not cheating. I've kind of earned my way. And he said, oh, yeah, but you're probably just a cross country racer. I said, no, dude, 24-hour solos. And finally, he blinked twice and almost had a little bit of respect for the moment. And then I had to double down and said, oh, yeah, I suppose I should add I was also a world champion in that as well. And then I walked on because I'd had enough of him. He'd read the book by the cover and made all kinds of assumptions but he was he couldn't have been more wrong. And so, the tools and vices that are out there, judging that book by its cover, as humans, sometimes we're just a little too quick to judge. And before I hopped on an electric mountain bike, I was that guy earning my way on a single speed, smashing and suffering like a dog, and watching the electric mountain bikes pass me. And even with me, who's been riding a long time, and I try to stay balanced on these things, I'd be a little bit like, I'm earning my way up this hill and you're sliding by, hardly breathing. But I think that it's an amazing tool to create an equalizing situation, certainly for families who want to ride together, or with friends of mine who could never ride with me just because I ride too fast. Now they can kind of keep up.
That's a great point. Anybody else got any thoughts before I jump on this question? Alana, you got something?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, I was just thinking about well, everything that he was speaking about, what we're naturally gifted with. Deb, I'm exactly the same as somebody who loves writing and enjoy what I do in the writing. And then you see things that come out that, it frustrates you. But then you've got to kind of come back to yourself and say, well, I'm naturally gifted at writing. Shaun naturally gifted at mountain biking. Dean can get on a bike and do these things. And there's always been, and I remember back in the 80s and all this beauty stuff started coming out, Botox and surgeries and all these things. And I was like, how are you ever going to know what somebody naturally looks like? It's really strange. And now, we live in Orange County, so you can imagine what we see every day. And you think, why would you ever want to actually look like that? And you imagine, I always look and think, what do people actually look like naturally? What's their natural look? And then even things like with Dean, he's naturally, people don't actually believe it, but that's actually what he naturally looks like. And there's people out there pumping themselves full of steroids and doing all these huge weight training and everything else. And Dean just uses body weight and ends up looking like that. We all have our natural gifted selves, and I don't think that any amount of AI or electric bikes or anything that we can do is going to account for that if it ever comes to the kind of Armageddon day. It's the naturally gifted that are going to shine through, I think.
I like that a lot. Seb, I hear you giggling there. What do you got?
No, it's funny. I imagine Dean doing bicep curls in private in a undisclosed location, area 51. He probably has access to anyways, and
that's why he's in the bathroom so long every morning. He's got a set of dumbbells in there.
Alana is like, he's only doing body weight. He's in there cranking him up. No, I really like that. But, one area where I like to shine the light on when it comes to this is, why is this bothering me? Like, what about this person, or what about what this person is doing is make me react? It makes me react. And why? Why am I reacting to this? And I think we all tend to do it to a certain extent. And I do it for sure. And I still do it. But every time it's having that conversation with myself. Why am I reacting to this situation? What does it matter if somebody else is perceived as being a decent writer when I like to write? Or what if this other person is fit? Or what is, it's inherently what happens is we bring our baggage with us everywhere we go. And that tints the lens by which we view the world. And for me, I started more and more challenging that all the time, because you find yourself sort of taking things away from other people, that whether they earn them or not is really irrelevant. But why is it your job to take it away from them? And I mean that in a metaphorical sense. I mean, I'm not actually taking anything away from anybody, but you are, and you can be. And so at this point in my life, and at this point when sort of dealing with people, I always remember that there is a tendency to flare up some either insecurities or some things that are bothering me, and those things are probably unaddressed things and things that I don't quite fully understand all the time. And so having that conversation with myself and logically overriding those emotions really helped me sort of give credit where credit is due. And even if credit necessarily isn't due, why am I taking it upon myself and taking the negative energy that's associated with bringing down the castle? Why is this my job? So it's just a philosophical point here, but really an interesting viewpoint.
It's an interesting thought. Absolutely. Dean, you got any?
Seb, sorry,
Sean.
I wouldn't mind adding to that. Seb is right. In fact, Seb I use as a good yardstick on how to do this subject better. I have to get better at it myself. However, there is a time and place where I think that sort of evaluation and then acting on it. Why is this bothering me? I need to talk to that person and explain to them, hey, you're falsely representing yourself. So if they're falsely representing themselves to themselves, that's a whole different subject than you're falsely representing yourself to a large community that is following you like the Pied Piper. So if you're the village idiot using ChatGPT 4.0 to appear crafty, and you're living a contrived life where everything is in its place, but just out of view, your life is a disaster. Now, if you're Pied Pipering people off the cliff incorrectly because you don't deserve to be at the front, you should be in the mid-pack or at the back of the pack instead of trying to lead falsely. That's a time where I take contention, for sure. And that's where I definitely will engage with someone if they're falsely representing themselves to a larger community that is being steered incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. Dean, you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Seb. You have to ask why you're getting angry, and I do it myself. And it probably is with the electric bike. Is I see people, especially when you're overachievers or achieve great things. I mean, you see people taking shortcuts, and it's like, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that to get to that position, and here you are now just going past me on a bike. And that's probably why I get upset with some of these youngsters who want this one pill to get them into special forces. No, it takes hard work and effort. And I think there's a community of people, me and myself, I can hear myself already getting angry about the electric bikes. But what I mean? And I think it's probably people like ourselves who have done it the natural way, the hard way. It's taken years hard work. And then, all of a sudden people just want that quick fix. We're in a society where everything's a quick fix. Alana and I can do an Amazon. It'll be here this afternoon. Everything's instantaneous, and they want that as well in success in life. And it's like, no, as you touched on there, Shaun, you're not a leader. That comes with time and experience. And so there's certain things that upset me, and that's where I was with the electric bike. And I was then convinced otherwise. And as you touched on, Shaun, then it gives you an opportunity for you and your wife to ride together. I now see the benefits, but where it upsets me is when people think they're amazing cyclists when they're just pulling a trigger. And it's like, let's get ourselves on a manual bike. And so it's probably my own insecurity.
Interesting. Alana, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, probably just on the back, because I think both points are great. What Seb's saying is, why is it bothering me? But what Shaun's saying is, I fully agree with that. And I see it often from somebody who's struggled in the past with eating disorders and things. There's a certain group of influencers and things out there that will sell like weight loss products and weight loss pills, using Photoshop or whatever to this is me before, this is me after. And yes, it is an individual's responsibility to go and check to make sure something, we don't just go and use something or use a product or do something without doing our research. But there is a lot of people out there that will use things like Instagram or TikTok or these things to be educated on something, and they can be advertising a product that can be really harmful to young girls in particular. I'll focus on, but take this for 30 days and you'll lose weight, and it's just encouraging this body dysmorphia. It's encouraging taking something that might not be great. So then I'm with Shaun, and that's when I'll take homage to it and say, no, this is wrong, you can't be doing this, check yourself. I wouldn't normally engage with anybody, but if I seen something like this is probably when I would get irritated. If somebody, is pretending to be a great writer using AI, it'll be a little bit irky, but we'll ignore it. But if you are actually doing harm to other people out there, portraying yourself one way when you've never done it like that, and forcing teaching more easily influenced people, I guess, the wrong way, then it is a responsibility to say something, I think.
And I think a perfect example from all of us on this thing is stolen valor. I just put that. I remember when Alana and I first met, and we bumped into some guys, and she's like, "Why are you getting so upset about it?" And it's like, "Oh my god." Whereas actually now, I sort of laugh it off, because I know some of them are mental health issues. But there's a perfect example we probably all experience: people portraying to be something they're not, and we get upset because we put that hard work in. So that's the only way I could probably, as a group, relate to it.
That is a great example. And go for it, Shaun.
I don't mind throwing this in. What's more frustrating than seeing stolen valor is being accused of stolen valor. I've been accused of stolen valor 5 times. I mean, officially, like by people who don't know me, because I just stayed out of the limelight for so long that they thought I was making things up. It's insane what goes on out there in some people's minds, for sure. One thing that I'd like to throw out there real quick on the AI is I've started doing it recently. We can use tools to create a game within the game. I love a good game within the game. That's how I like to run my life. And so I've probably used AI now about a dozen times on Instagram to create some sort of writing on a post that I've done, and not used AI fully. I maybe used it about 60% of the verbiage that I put into a post, and then put in my own craftiness or lack thereof. And so I've put that up, and then I've done some posts where I've not used AI at all, and I've yardsticked myself against my own efforts. And so it's a tool for me to keep raising my bar through the evolutionary process of bringing in more tools to try to be more helpful out there, not just to the collective, but to anyone who tracks me on IG. So I am careful with AI to better yardstick myself, Shaun, against the computer to see how I can do it better interacting with it while still being authentic to the human being.
So there is a question here that touches on all of this, and I want to ask you guys all this. I'm going to come back to you, Shaun, first on this, though, but because he mentions you specifically. So Daniel Labonte hits this: the awareness of knowing when an obsession becomes too far right, and to take Shaun's concept, a pattern interrupt is required. Have you found that in doing so, it's provided even more benefit? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about in the use of AI. But if you'd like to enlighten on that question, what do you think?
No, that's precisely it. I mean, I've stated this before. In fact, I think we were just talking about it yesterday. I like to understand the extreme edges of things. And once I understand the extreme edge, I like to rub up against it a bunch more and then expand it even further. So I need to play in my box called the world and keep pushing that envelope to better play in the world. So I'm all about pushing the extremes to better understand how to play somewhere in between the extremes.
Alana, you got any thoughts on this?
It's weird. The first thought that came to my head was something that I learned a long time ago, and I think hypnotherapy or something, was about changing your small daily habits to interrupt your obsessive daily habits. So even things like going into the shower in the morning. How do you normally shower? Do you wash under your left armpit first, your right armpit, all these things, and then just switching those tiny little things up? It starts making your brain think in that different way. So how you normally, you normally put your right leg in before your left leg into your pants. How do you do these things daily? If you start switching those little things up, then those obsessive habits that you've got that you're doing in the wrong, as the question's being asked, how do you interrupt that pattern? By interrupting those tiny little ones throughout the day. It starts interrupting the larger ones and stopping those obsessions.
Dean, what do you think?
I'm just trying to work out whether I do my left armpit first or my right armpit. Yeah, I think it's true what Alana said is it's a pattern interrupt. Yeah, sorry, I've got the landscape outside. The pattern interrupt. Yeah, if it goes too far right, you need to then look at what you're doing. And I do agree that with both of them that a pattern interrupt can help that, or come back to the drawing board. Start all over again. Are you doing it right or not? So sort of, if you realize you are going far too right, then just address it. I sometimes with my tools, I realize actually it's not working. And is it the tool that's not working? Am I not using it correctly? And so I'll just go straight back to the drawing board or find another tool.
Definitely find another tool like that.
Yeah.
Seb, any thoughts on this?
No, I really got nothing to contribute. That's really meaningful here. I agree with all of this, but
Raj. Now we are just about at time here, so I'm gonna go around. We'll get some final thoughts on anything we got, anything we've talked about so far. But first off, I do want to thank you all. Fantastic conversation. I really did enjoy this. We hit a lot of great points on this, so really do appreciate it, everybody. Final thoughts. I'm gonna start with Alana, and I'll work my way down.
I wish you have to start with me. No, it's really interesting to start thinking about what the difference is between a tool and a vice, and I think we'd all agree that either one can be either, and both to everyone. But yeah, just having the thoughts, thinking about everybody else around you is probably the best way to do it. It's either going to be one or the other, and you're not always right.
I like that. Dean, final thoughts?
I think for me that everyone's unique. You know, just because other people are using tools and it works for them, it might not work for you. I know that my tools that I use aren't the ones that Alana uses, but they work for me. So just because someone else is using it might not be for you, and just find out what does work for you, and then when you do it, get the balance right. Just get the balance right. Don't turn it into a vice.
I like it. Seb, final thoughts?
yeah, that's a great point. When you do realize that some tool isn't going to work for you necessarily, a lot of the times what happens is, well, this isn't just going to work for me. But there's nothing following that up. It's not like, okay, so now how do I find what does work for me? And so at the very least, if you learn anything from this, is that there are tools out there that different people use. So now it should bring enough awareness to you to have the ability to negotiate life through your lens with the tools that you have around you, or the things that work for you. So that's one fold. And then I would also say, try to have a less black and white approach. I find, this is either a tool or it's a vice. There's no sort of mid range, and we do that as humans all the time. We go from one extreme to the complete other extreme, and we create all the issues that come along with that. But we'll never know where it would have been beneficial to change things, because we did it so drastically that we don't know. Whereas if you change a little thing and you change another little thing, you get to see the progress that occurs as a result of you changing something in a measurable way. So if you're doing something that potentially has a bit of potential to go to the far right, or to drag you into Instagram land, or whatever the case may be, try a moderate approach to fixing that, instead of the complete opposite. Okay, what I'm going to do now is completely leave Instagram, or what I'm going to do now is never use this tool, whatever that tool might be. So have a measured approach to your adjustment calibration.
I like it. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, perfectly timed camper van. I would say that in order to understand your tools and your vices and how to use them or how not to use them, before any of that, you've just got to be aware of the now, aware of who you are in the present. And to Dean's point, I can see that Dean is an arm folder, just like myself. And I tuck my left hand underneath my right armpit, and my right hand goes on my left bicep. That's the way I've always done it. But sometimes when I want to annoy myself, I flip that script. I flippity flop it. Now all of a sudden you're aware. And that's just the way of things. Pattern interrupts. If you want to flip that script, you've got to do something just a little bit different. Invert your regular pattern in order to become aware that it was a pattern, and come into the present and start thinking about these kind of things. So Dean, for the rest of today, I hope that you'll join me on team arm fold swap, because that's my plan all day long.
That and bicep curls. There we go.
There you go. I was just thinking that, right over left, left over right, when you try and tie knots, and it's like, well, what if you start left over right? And like, mind blows, right? It's actually interesting that you guys all bring this up, because just recently, I hurt my right shoulder. So I've had to change how I do jiu-jitsu now. When I train, I can't really use my right shoulder as much. So I have to switch to my left side, which is super awkward. But that feeling of awkwardness is your brain actually creating new pathways. So I would always say just lean into it. If it starts to get awkward, lean into it a little bit. But that's just me. So again, really do appreciate the conversation, everybody. Dean, Alana, Seb, Shaun, fantastic conversation. We're getting some great feedback right now. The flow of the chat was amazing. Thank you all. It's been an amazing episode. Great panel. Awesome people. Really do appreciate all of the comments and questions. I know I didn't get to all of them, but fantastic. Thank you, everybody. So as we all learn about ourselves and build up the tools we have, break down the vices we have, we can grow into the people that we're meant to be. And you can do that with us every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.